Okay, this is a very short, very brief introduction to the philosophy of science, which is going to set some sort of foundational background stuff for a lot of what we're going to be doing. We're not necessarily going to be working with this every day, but it's something that I think is useful to kind of understand where we're starting from and consider it sort of a vocabulary building, sort of concept building activity. So when we talk about the philosophy of science, we need to sort of differentiate between ontology, epistemology, and methodology. So ontology is our big picture, grandiose philosophical foundational assumptions about the nature of the world, right? What it is, what exists, what's possible. And I think most of the folks taking this class probably have an enlightenment or something that has built on that ontology. And so in the Enlightenment, people began to think about the universe and the world around them as something that was governed by natural laws. Things were regular and predictable, and there were forces in the world that operated consistently, right? It wasn't just the will and the whims of demons and angels and deities. It was a regular system that we as human beings could observe and could understand. And so when we're talking about ontology, it's really those foundational, philosophical big picture ideas that we're bringing to the table, right? Do I believe that there are forces in the world that are regular and systematic, like gravity, or the invisible hand that Adam Smith talked about? What are the things that cause other things to occur? How does that work? So that's ontology. Depending upon your ontology, you're going to want to think about epistemology, and you'll have a different answer to this, foundational epistemological question of how do we know something is true? And so, if I'm a fourth century Norseman, and my ontology is all rooted in the gods of not Olympus. I should know where Thor lives because I've watched the Avenger movies, right? Asgard, right? The gods of Asgard rule over everything. If I want to know what is true, a reasonable strategy would be to go to a priest of Odin or a priest of Thor and get a reading of some kind, or throw bones and have Odin show me things with bones. Like that is a realistic way to get information if that's your ontology. That Asgard is sort of ruling over everything and directing things like lightning. If you have an Enlightenment epistemology, however, that sort of argues that there's these regular forces in the universe, these systematic patterns, your epistemology is maybe more scientific in orientation, right? I can use my powers of observation to observe the world, to study it, to make systematic records of what's happening, to analyze those records, to develop hypotheses and draw conclusions. I can use empirical tools to understand what is true. And then we drill into sort of, okay, so what does that actually look like in practice, right? What are the specific procedures, right, that you're going to have to follow to be able to analyze the world in a way that's going to be considered valid, that people are going to believe and accept. And so when we think about these three things, right, they're all linked together, but we really can't talk about social science as we talk about social science in this class without recognizing that it rests on a certain type of ontology. And I don't know what your ontology is, right? I certainly know that mine is reasonably close to that Enlightenment ontology of there are regular forces in the universe that act in predictable ways. But those are philosophical questions that I can't answer for other people. But it's worth sort of having that as our starting point so we know sort of where a lot of this is coming from. Okay, so we've got ontology, epistemology, methodology. Then we also have this idea of social science. And social science is a set of socially agreed upon methods that are focused on empirical analysis, empirical analysis that are systematic and they're communicable. Okay, so I want to begin with socially agreed upon. Social science exists within a community, right, of people who all share a common kind of understanding of what we're doing when we do social science. We share common methodologies. And one of the ways that we build that sort of shared community of common methodologies is classes like this, right? Classes where we're learning about what are the things that our social scientific community finds valid? What are the things that they're less impressed by? Okay, so socially agreed upon methods. Methods are those procedures for determining truth based on our epistemologies. They're focused on empirical analysis, right? What that means is that we're interested in observing the world, measuring the world, analyzing the world, empirical, based on data and observations of the world. It's systematic, right? So this is not just, I had an anecdote that I'd like to share with you. It's, I had an anecdote, and then I went out and measured things in a systematic way and concluded that my anecdote is correct and is representative, or the rest of the world doesn't align with that anecdote, right? So there's a level of systematic rigor in what we're doing. And then communicable, right? This is part of a community, social science. We're interacting with other people who are part of this community. They're interested in what we're doing, and we should be able to communicate to other people what we've done in a way that they can understand what we've done, maybe replicate what we've done, and build on what we've done. Okay, social science often, although not all social sciences do this, is focused on developing a general understanding, right? So we might call it theory, to improve or improving description and measurement. So a lot of social science and political science is focused on this idea of we're building theory. If you've taken international politics from me, you've probably heard my rant about theory. I am a big proponent of using theory to navigate a complex world. And in fact, you might have heard me use this word parsimonious. Social scientists believe that our theories should be parsimonious, which means elegantly simple. What it means is that we're taking a big, complex, messy world with too much going on to be able to fully comprehend the complexity of it. And we've created a theory, a way of navigating that complexity, of being able to say, ignore a lot of that other stuff that's going on. It doesn't matter. Focus on these 3 or 4 things. That's what you need to really be able to navigate this world. So parsimonious, elegantly simple. Theories are also generalizable, right? This is maybe something that differentiates social sciences from history. History is oftentimes interested in understanding the nuances of a specific situation, about how all the pieces came together in that specific situation to produce a particular outcome. In the social sciences, yeah, we're interested in that, but we're also interested in, does the story that played out in this historical example work in other historical examples? What does this one situation tell me about other situations? And so it's not necessarily about finding the nuance and the complexities of a case or of a situation. It's about sort of teasing out what's sort of the part that's general about how the world works, and that can help us to build a theory and navigate the world going forward. And I would also flag that theories in social science are not normative, they're empirical. They're aimed at explaining the world as it is, as we observe it. Whereas normative theory or normative analysis is focused on those big philosophical questions of, what's good and just, right? How should society be organized? What is fair, right? Those are political theory questions, right? Political philosophy questions, but they're different than social science questions. Social science questions are aimed at, right? Why does this happen? Or what is the effect of this other thing? We're focused on the empirical side of the question. I will say, however, that it's not that social scientists are indifferent to normative concerns, right? I'm a scholar of civil wars. I study civil wars around the world. One of the reasons why I am interested in and concerned about civil wars is because they tend to be the form of violence that kills a lot of people in the world that I've lived in. And I think things that kill people are bad. That's a normative judgment. But when I approach the task of studying a civil war, I'm not interested in identifying who are bad people, or what situation is really horrible versus justifiable. I'm interested in questions of, how long did this war last, right? What was the effect of this intervention? What pushes rebels and governments to the negotiating table? Those are empirical questions, not normative questions. All right, and then lastly, I'll just talk a little bit about theory. The textbook introduces this sort of range of types of theories. And I think it's useful to kind of have in the back of your mind. So we could talk about paradigms, which are these sort of big picture foundational assumptions kind of derived from your ontology almost about the world. And that kind of directs how you're going to go about studying the world. So positivists, one of the schools of thought talked about in chapter 1 of our textbook, positivists tend to view the world as sort of that enlightenment vision, that I can study the world, I can analyze the world, there are things out there that exist, and I can, study them. And I can form generalizable theories, versus social constructivists who say, okay, yeah, we can study the world and we can analyze the world, but social science is different than chemistry. In chemistry, there are atoms, we're pretty sure, and we're pretty sure that a hydrogen atom is different from a helium atom, and we're pretty sure we know why. Concepts in the social sciences tend to be murkier. Is there such a thing as democracy? What does that mean? And does the concept of democracy mean the same thing over time? It can be hard to measure, it can be hard to define, it can change over time. And what we find when we start wrestling with the complexity of that question is that democracy doesn't exist as a thing the way that a hydrogen atom can exist as a thing. Democracy is something that we as people have sort of developed the concept of, developed the definition of, that we work with that in different ways at different points in time, that our understanding of the world and the concepts that we're using to analyze it are socially constructed, right? And that's going to lead to a very different kind of analysis. And so the paradigms, sort of like your ontologies, are going to orient how you approach the task of studying your world, and indeed what you think you can actually do with social science. We can talk about grand theories. These are sort of long-standing research traditions and how we understand our field. One of my colleagues, Paul Sum, is a really brilliant man, and we tend to disagree on a lot of things. And at first I was very concerned because he is much smarter than me, and if we disagree, that could imply that I'm wrong, which I don't like to be. But after a while, I came to recognize that our disagreements were because Paul Sum is trained as a behavioralist. He teaches our class political behavior at UND. When he thinks about politics, he thinks about individual people. He thinks about their beliefs and attitudes. He thinks about what they desire, right? That's how he thinks about politics. It's all about people and what people are doing. And I'm an institutionalist. I actually don't really care that much about people. I mean, I just said that I care about civil wars because they kill people. But in terms of thinking about how the world works, I tend to view people as kind of cogs in a machine. And we really just need to understand the machine itself, because the people can come and go. But if we understand the machine, we understand how things really work. I'm an institutionalist. I'm interested in the rules that govern society and politics and power. I'm interested in the structure of how many veto points are there in a political system, or how many powerful actors are there in the international system, right? Those are the kind of things that help me to navigate the world. And both are valid ways of thinking about the world, but they're going to really direct your focus and direct your attention in different ways. And so I think that's worth recognizing, that again, the theories that we work with are going to shape the kind of questions that we ask and how we think about the world. And then finally, we could talk about middle range theories, which are, we have a peacekeeping mission. Why do some work and other peacekeeping missions not work very well? Or we could ask the question, why do people vote? And it's not enough to say, well, behavioralism, because that doesn't really help us answer that question. We need to sort of drill down to what specific interactions or beliefs or attitudes or experiences get people to take that step. And so, again, these are just different vocabulary terms that are going to help us navigate through the rest of the course. But I think this is a good place to start in terms of sort of big picture stuff about how social science operates and what we're trying to do with it.